lots of Dark Eldar players have piles of witch models. Witch models look cool, but they became less useful in 7th edition with the new codex. And they're not the most useless troops, but they're more expensive than Cabalites, and they don't have quite the punch they used to, and they've got some real drawbacks. Let me just go through this so if you're never done this, you'll understand. Witches are your standard toughness 3. They could be toughness 4 with drugs, but toughness 3 troops. They have a 6+ save. They could buy some war gear that gives them some bonus to their attacks, but they rely on the fact that they have a 4+ invulnerable save, but it's only in the combat phase. So when you think about it, you have a hard time getting them into combat. And even if they're in combat, a lot of times a 4+ save is not that awesome. So it really depends what you're using them to go up against. If they're going up against guardsmen or something, then in combat they're awesome and they'll clean up. But they're still only strength 3. There's just a lot of stuff going against them, so they really became less useful in this current edition. And a lot of people just they see no value in them, and they're not using their witches. But what I think is interesting is a way to get them to be useful. If you were to look at the HQ section, one of the options in the Court of the Archon is to take the Lamian, and the Lamian, she's actually a special kind of witch. If you look at page 39 in the new codex, it talks, a little box at the bottom talks about the Lamian cult and how they're special toxin procurers from the homunculi. Well, they also have a nice model, but it is an absolutely static model. It doesn't look like a bunch of guys, or I guess girls, heading out for combat. It just lacks it. So, unlike witches, who are quite dynamic, you can change all sorts of poses on them. The Lamians all look the same. Here's my suggestion. Lamians and witches have the same cost. They're both 10 points a model. Since Lamians are witches, unless you're playing with a group of people who absolutely insist that your models are exactly what they say they are, so you have to have the model made by GW that says it's a Lamian model, instead of using witches, why not use witch models, which a lot of people have, and play them as Lamian? And here's the reason why. They're the same cost. Now, they're not troops, but they're the same cost, 10 points a model. The Lamian actually has an armor save of 5+, which is pretty significant, because if you're in a vehicle and it blows up, that 6+ armor save is devastating. 5+ is significantly better. It's still obviously not great. But she has a 5+ armor save, and then she has feel no pain and all that. And the other nice thing, the thing that really makes her worthwhile, is her stat line is the same as the witch, but her close combat weapons are 2+ poison with lethal dose, which means, as long as you pick your targets correctly, the Lamian is more survivable and does more damage for the same number of points as your old witches did. Obviously, she doesn't work against vehicles or against certain units, but if you were to put the Lamian up against monstrous creatures, that wounding on a 2-up and instant deathing makes the Lamians more lethal and more survivable than witches with their 4+ invulnerable save. Monstrous creatures, almost all of them ignore the feel no pain, so you're hoping to get a lot of wounds in first, since most monstrous creatures don't have high wounds. Lamians will do that, because they'll wound on almost every hit they get, and as long as they're not assaulting into cover, they will strike first. If you're going up against anything else that doesn't have an AP value, or even if it's AP 6, but if you're going up against orcs, guardsmen, most space marines, Tau, Eldar, whatever, the Lamian will pay off better than witches, because having a 5+ armor save and feel no pain is better than a 4+ invulnerable and feel no pain when the 4+ invulnerable is only in the combat phase. So it doesn't work when they get shot with Overwatch, it doesn't work when their vehicle blows up, etc. You'll get, on average, more Lamians into that combat than you will get, out of the combat. The fact that they will cause more wounds, witches have strength 3, so even when they have shred, they're just not likely to wound, even when they fight against Space Marines, because they only wound them on a 5. So I think a good use for those witch models that many people have put away is play them as Lamian, and take them as an HQ slot. If you have an Archon, they're a free HQ slot. They don't take up a slot. And use them for that, and see how they go, because I've played them in a number of games, and they're actually pretty effective, as long as you don't go up against high-speed, instant death, guys, or as long as you pick your target reasonably. But when your target is picked reasonably, that wounding on a 2 with an armor save when they get out of their vehicle if it blows up is pretty good. And they still have the same number of attacks, and they have a shooting attack with their pistol, so they are much better.